Welcome to the Details of Life, episode 5, with your host, Marcus Wilson. I am Marcus Wilson. I just got to thank you guys because earlier in the week, I asked you guys to help me get over 5,000 views on YouTube. And sure enough, here we are at 5,140 views. Going into this episode, this is being recorded right now on a Saturday. So by the time you listen to this, we might be well over that. So thank you for supporting. Like I said, I didn't know what to expect, what type of support. So it's just really overwhelming. And I'm grateful for you guys. But just want to preface, I got to give a shout out to my man, Casey over at St. Louis Christian, for allowing me to record in his office. I was out of studio space and I was at a jam, and you know what? Friends stepped up. So you're going to see some St. Louis Christian jerseys hanging in the background with me and Osei. And then right now I'm in a hotel room. I'm traveling. I'm in Evansville to give back. I was back here working, doing something in my university. So, hey, got to give another shout out to the Cold Stairs. They're going to be coming on here. Many of you from Evansville know them. That really funky intro and outro music that you hear, that's them. They've been traveling to Vegas and going all around Memphis and all that. So got to give a shout out to them for allowing me to use their music. Just want to give thanks to my friends, because stuff like this doesn't happen alone. It's not just me. It's people that's coming on, sacrificing their time, people giving up their space to allow me to record, and you guys for liking and sharing and telling other people to tune in and listen. So thank you to all of you guys, and thank you for helping us be successful. With that said, going in, today's guest is, like I said, we wanted to get away from just doing only sports figures. We're going to start diversifying who's all on the show. And today we bring in worldwide. When I say worldwide, he's from, has been, spent a lot of time in Ghana, has African roots, great DJ in Washington, D.C., Atlanta, St. Louis, now back in Atlanta, doing some international bringing some international flavor to the Atlanta market. Osei The Dark Secret. A lot of you guys are going to recognize his voice as soon as you hear him. He's got a really unique voice and just really one of the best DJs around, in my opinion. Or maybe I'm just biased, but I think he's really good. And I think once you hear him, you're going to be able to put the name with the face if you didn't know who he was. So we cover a lot of topics here, more than just your average. And like I said, stepping away from sports. So I think it'll be something that you're going to enjoy. So without any further ado, Osei The Dark Secret, Kweku. All right, man. My next guest on today's podcast, old friend of mine. Many of you may know him from multiple cities across the country: St. Louis, Washington, D.C., Atlanta. Man, worldwide known DJ right here. Multiple titles, which we're going to get into all that. My man, Osei Kweku. How you doing, Osei?
I'm blessed, brother. What's up, man? Marcus?
Appreciate you making it in town today, man.
Thank you, man.
So we're going to get into that. Osei was working here, and we really connected on a lot of things, trying to get some initiatives in the community here. And now he has since went back to Atlanta. And so, man, but before we get into your DJing, I like people to get to know, where you're from and what you're doing. And so, man, where you from? I know you got African roots, but tell the people where you're from.
So I was actually born in Ontario, Canada, a place called Kitchener. My mother lives in Toronto. I was raised in the U.S., Cleveland, the Midwest, moving through there, Toledo. Went to high school in Cleveland, and went to college in Virginia on the East Coast. So I went to Hampton University, which is a HBCU. And, essentially, I like to consider myself as, I like to think that the ancestors sent me a little differently. I can kind of relate the experience of being African-American in a bit of a different way, through a different lens, because of my upbringing. Yeah. So my stepmother is from Cleveland, Ohio. Her family was from Liberty, Mississippi, and Pittsburgh. And so the only grandfather I've ever known is a man by the name of Obedi McKnight, who was from Liberty, Mississippi, and really taught me a lot, just overall, but it kind of helped to kind of mesh my experiences together. My family being first generation, us, being first generation in this country, I was raised a little bit differently, so I think it gave me a bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, so I know just from our history, but man, where did the name The Dark Secret come from? I think a lot of people, they recognize that when they hear it. It's like Osei, and The Dark Secret. So how did that come about? Why did you decide to go with that name?
It's kind of like a play on words. Obviously, I'm dark skinned, but I always have felt that being a person of color wasn't necessarily the most popular thing. And I think even among people of color, being dark sometimes can be something that, we shy away from because of our history. And I feel like the secret is definitely in the melanin. And the secret goes, back to the law of attraction. And, at the time that I chose it, I wanted to be able to maintain my name, but add something that made you curious, made you wonder. And I felt like, okay, this would work. But as I got to understand and moving through life, understanding, about the secret, understanding the law of attraction, I saw things that just resonated with me. And I was like, well, this is what I've been trying to do, but I didn't understand and know how to articulate it at that time.
Yeah.
And so it was always something, clever. Obviously, the ladies always liked it, but,
That counts.
Yeah, it definitely counts. It definitely counts. But it definitely has a deeper meaning, and it was really about getting in tune with myself. A lot of things, and one of the things I think is important for me to share is that I struggle with embracing my culture, coming to this country at a young age. And so for me, it was forever a part of my destiny to ensure that I embraced that and I spoke about it wherever I went, that I used the voice that God gave me to make sure I articulate these things. To some people in Africa, or in my own country, I may not be African enough because of how I was raised. And to other people, here, I was never American, no matter what I tried to do. But understanding who you are in the context and the grand scheme of what the world is and what God's purpose is for you, I think is the most important clarity that you can come to.
Man, that's real, man. And I know, like, one thing I would add to that is I love the fact that the name, The Dark Secret, you took what was, at the time, growing up in the Midwest, dark-skinned brother, what was used to possibly degrade you, you use that word to empower you, which is now what you're known for, right?
Exactly.
So I really want we talked about that before, so I wanted people to know, that you took the power away from other people and gave yourself power, which was once an insult, and now it's a worldwide name, man. So I respect that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So let's go into, man, so how did you get to St. Louis? I know, but like, man, what was your pathway to get to St. Louis? And then we'll take off into what you're doing next.
So I had stepped away from broadcasting for a number of years and was focused more on the music side of the industry. As a manager, executive type, that's the pathway I was on. I got a couple artists signed along the way, but music is definitely, those are some treacherous waters when you dive in, and you learn a lot. And so I had stepped away and had, a number of opportunities to kind of come back to radio. And so St. Louis was one of the options that kind of came about at that time. And I had worked with a gentleman who was here, James Robinson, shout out to James, and also Kathy Brown. She had been my boss in DC, and definitely loved working with KB. So it seemed like the circumstances were just set up, right. And I ended up taking this opportunity and came to St. Louis. Another reason why I wanted to come here was, there's a legendary radio personality and radio executive now named Doc Winter who came to the station. And that was one of the reasons that made me say, he came through here. I want to come through there as well. Yeah. Obviously, there was something about it that allowed him to go on to his next opportunity. And when they say, if you can make it in St. Louis, you can make it anywhere. They ain't lying. Right. So I understand, you know what I mean? But that's what it was. And I came from Atlanta to St. Louis, took this opportunity. It was definitely, a challenge. And in some ways, very much a struggle because in radio, going market to market, depending on what brand that you're working with, no matter what the company is, every company has to have their brand established in that market, or else it doesn't mean anything. And so, it was a struggle for us because there's some stiff competition here that we were up against. And, I just came in and just, put in work, which is how, really we met. And, it's really all about, no matter where you're at in the world, I always tell people this, radio is like the last frontier, the last connection that people have, or the most connectivity that they'll get when it comes to having an organic relationship. And so radio to me is all about the community. Yeah. And, that's what it was with us.
I can vouch for that, man. So to give some people some more context, so one of the things I always try to do in terms of building relationships is I try to give as much as I can. And then when I do need something, I rarely have to ask because I've helped people. And so people are often kind of taken aback by that, especially I've seen, not just in St. Louis, but just in general, because people are like, man, what are you trying to get out of this? What do you want? And so I can vouch that Osei did that for me when we were working together here. He reached out, heard about what I was doing. We was connected through another mutual friend, Theo. Shout out to Theo for connecting us and all that. And so, and then he was like, man, I just want to help you get the word out on what you're doing at the Y. I love what you're doing in the community. Hey, come on the radio station. Come on up. Just talk about what you're doing and no questions asked. And I was like, man, like this is too good to be true. Why is this brother doing so much to help? But man, we kind of like-minded like that, man. We got to lift each other up, help each other. If somebody's doing something good for the community, let's get the word out and let's try to work together and collaborate on doing it. So, we did that, and very community oriented base, because that's how I feel like you get your brand out so well. It's like you out there in the streets. I'm not talking about running the streets, hustling or nothing, but out there with the people, knowing what's going on, connecting and building relationships. So then they're like, man, I want to support this brother. He was just with me yesterday at the joint, at the party I threw, at the community event that I threw. And so, man, just been great establishing relationships on that level. So then, transition came, went back to Atlanta. And from what I know right now, I know you're doing something right now that's never been done, doing something with the international flavor in Atlanta. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, man. So the international movement, and I specifically, we started calling it that back then. We were like the first on the radio, on the national level, kind of promoting this type of party. And what that party was Afrobeat, dance hall, hip hop, reggae, top 40, just a mashup of music. And it was called African City. So this had never been done before. And it was really about pushing the whole concept of Africa, more from a Pan-African perspective versus your country and all this other stuff. And it was super successful, and it really caught the attention of many people, across the country and around the world. And I was breaking a lot of the Afrobeat artists, even on terrestrial radio, when a lot of people thought it was reggae because they didn't really understand. But there's so many sounds even within that, and so many more to come. And it started with me introducing an artist by the name of WizKid to Akon, and encouraging Akon to really get behind this, because I said this is the next movement. And at that time it was early, and I think that sometimes you can be a little early in your vision, and it's just not aligned at that moment. Yeah. And so that was a maturing moment. That was a sobering moment too, because I was so hard pressed. And I really, even how I got into broadcasting, I was a psych pre-med major, but I hustled my way up. And so sometimes you can be efforting so hard.
Wait a second, I need you to back up on that. Yeah. So you was a what major?
I was psychology pre-med major in school.
Man, hey.
Yeah.
I know I would have flunked out.
I know another story.
Props to you on that, brother. But anyway.
I'm not, and I'll be honest, man, I feel like my talents, I was a decent student. And I could have been a lot greater. I think, I was a big dreamer, and I have been since I was a kid. And I'm now seeing the manifestation of things that I've dreamed about for a long time coming together. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times with people, it can be a little difficult because we're so hell-bent on how we want our ideas to flourish that sometimes we don't release them and really give it up to God and let Him. Yeah. Really, you have to take some faith steps, some jumps, some leaps that you don't know how it's gonna happen. And I think one of those leaps for me was coming to St. Louis. I wouldn't have ended up back in Atlanta in the capacity that I did had I not come here. Yeah. But I was kind of submitting, and I really prayed on it, and it was a tough matriculation, I'd say, but I graduated. And I was here 4 years. Yeah. So a lot like going through school, so to speak. A lot of times, and just a sidebar for a minute. A lot of times I hear people say that you don't need to go to school. You're not learning anything in school in 2020, especially when you talk about the debt and everything else. Yeah. I don't think that school is always about the formal education you receive. I think it's about the social interactions you're able to achieve because you're meeting a lot of different people from various backgrounds, and you're taught how to interact with a lot of different people who may or may not be like you. Yep. And depending on how you adjust to that education is going to really reflect in how you move through life.
Yeah.
And so, with that understanding, I majored in it. My father's a physician. I wasn't necessarily, always on top, necessarily focused, but I had my plan. I had a vision, and I executed that. And so a lot of people that I went to school with were like, how the hell did you have all this success in broadcasting? But that was because I know that you're not going to outwork me.
Right.
And that's, in anything that if I decide I'm going to do this, I'm going to hustle and I'm going to figure it out. And, I just think I applied that attitude, and that's how I was able to have success and find success in broadcasting.
Man, I want to double down on what you said. I went to the University of Evansville, and Evansville at the time, it's gotten more diverse now, but even back then, many of my classes, I was the only African American in the class, and at the time it was hard. But now looking back on how I've been a part of different movements and led different businesses, if you can't relate to and lead different demographics of people, you're never going to be a leader.
You will never be a leader.
You can only, very few people thrive only serving one demographic, right? And so, now I know how to, I tell people all the time, I can walk into the hood, into a house of a single mom with 8 kids and relate, because I grew up in a poor environment. I'm the youngest of 15 kids. I can also walk into a room full of millionaires, white millionaires, and I'm the only black person in the room, and I don't feel uncomfortable. College taught me that. That was, like you said, it wasn't the formal education, it was the social aspect that made me more well-rounded. And so I definitely agree with that, brother. So tell me, man, so what's on the horizon for you, man? Tell me, like, how is, I know you're doing that with international flavor.
Sure.
Atlanta has a much bigger international market than St. Louis, so I could imagine it's going to be more successful there than it is here, just because you have more, first of all, you have triple the size of the city in terms of population, and more people from different areas of the world, African roots and stuff. So how is that turning out for you, man? You have a successful... Right?
Absolutely. I think Atlanta is an amazing city. It's a rare gem on a global level in terms of what is happening there, and even for people of color, just from a global standpoint, in terms of them having a lot of political influence and economic influence. So when you are able to observe all of this, you can't help but be inspired. And Atlanta, again, has been a godsend. So was St. Louis. And I look forward to connecting, ATL and STL, and really doing a lot of things that I began here. One of the things, the challenges I think in St. Louis is obviously, it's a lot more polarized in terms of the racial component, but I think that when you're engaging people who really get it, regardless of their ethnicity, that's the beauty. And those people are really pushing the region forward. And I got to shout out Leadership St. Louis, man. Yemi Akande for, her leadership is amazing. And it taught me a lot. And like you said, being able to be a leader no matter what the demographic you're involved in, For me, I lived as far away as Saskatoon, Saskatchewan for a couple years of my life. And I was the only brother for many miles. Okay? Many miles. And that was a real sobering and eye-opening experience, because I was able to just learn a different aspect of life at that moment in my life. And I think that all those things, kind of like the sum total of who you are, those experiences start to add up. And as you move, later in life, navigating and being in different rooms, I learned to develop a sense of diplomacy very early on, because I didn't have all my cousins and my whole family everywhere. So, you go into the hood, you need to come, with your arms open and not look menacing. Because, certain things can leave you in a very compromised state of affairs if you don't know how to engage and move around and talk. And I mean, I feel like I'm comfortable with lions and lambs. And I feel like, that was an experience, just kind of growing up. And my father, as a physician, served, in our community where we were underserved in many ways. And sometimes, being that element, Black people, we're hard on each other, let alone, the world at large and what we experience. So I feel like, what I'm doing now is I'm moving in purpose. And for me, moving in purpose is how can I serve? Service is what it's really all about, no matter what you're doing. And if you're not serving in any capacity, then you're not really adding value or leaving value in any places that you go. And whether that's mentorship of younger adults, whether that's what you give to the community. You can't just be a taker out here.
And when you say give, I want to clarify, that's not just giving money.
No.
That could be giving your time.
Absolutely.
That could be giving money.
Yeah.
That could be giving your knowledge, imparting it down to the younger generation.
Absolutely.
So sometimes when people say give, they're like, I ain't got nothing to give. I'm sure you got something to give.
We all
everybody has something to give.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that because, you can check us out on V103 International as well. I do a show there and I interview Akon. And we were talking about that and his thoughts on charity and, charity versus welfare. And like he believes in welfare, but spoke a little bit more about just, throwing money at things as opposed to really getting involved and, figuring out how do you make a difference. Because a lot of times people who stroke the check, they have the peace of mind to say, I did this, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's impacting. You know what I mean? And we see a lot of charities that, function like that. And that doesn't change the spirit of what giving is, man. You get the energy that you're willing to put out. So I try to make sure I relax my mind and I'm not looking at people from a place of judgment and trying to figure out what they're going to do with this or how they handled it. That's not my job to police them. My job is to do what the spirit called me to do, which is here, I'm going to help you, saying that what you do with it is on you.
It's on you, right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that, especially when you talk about hip hop and being a product of hip hop, I think that the philanthropic side of hip hop is just now starting to manifest. So we're just now learning how to give back. A lot of times when they say the game is to be sold, not to be told, we use all these clever terms and phrases to really not share because we weren't taught like that. We weren't taught like that coming out of slavery. So a lot of times, people wonder, and they when you talk about the greater construct of racism and everything else, a lot of times people say just move on. But you're not given tools to just move on if you're not talking through. That's what therapy is. You talk through your trauma. But for so long, we suppress it, which is why I think that we have black on black crime and things like that. We're frustrated with a lot of things and we ended up taking it out on each other, and we're not necessarily
knowing how to work together because I feel like there's only so much to get, so it's either mine or yours.
It's a lack mentality, and there's plenty. I mean, if you fly across this country, that's one of the biggest misconceptions about life is that there's not enough. There's plenty. We all choose to come. I don't even know how you can be racist and choose to come to a big city as if you're only going to see people you want to see. It doesn't work like that. We're all congregating in the same places. We all coexist and we all need each other. You know what I'm saying? And in taking it a step further, God has a plan even for North Korea, even if you don't like them. You know what I'm saying? And I say that just, you can't just get people up out of here and think that the world just keeps moving. It doesn't work like that. We all have to coexist. And that's really the bigger lesson for all of us in learning how we work through all these different things. And you do have to let go of traumatic things and figure out how do you move past it and how do you work past it. But again, those skills have to be taught to us, and we have to channel our energy no different than, hey, you could be, Big Meech. So if he's running BMF, he could certainly be running Coca-Cola because he understands how to run large corporate structures. You know what I mean?
Man, two things. Number one is, I think one of the reasons you see cities like Atlanta, New York City, Houston thriving is because they embrace diversity better and they work with multiple groups of people. We in St. Louis, so no disrespect to St. Louis, but I think a lot of St. Louisers will tell you they don't mess with outsiders too much. You got to really earn the respect to get in. And so therefore it makes it like, if you think about it as a pie, St. Louis population isn't growing at the rate of like Atlanta or Nashville or Houston. So therefore, to some extent, there's a limited number of dollars. People know the philanthropists. If you want to start a project, there's several millionaires and there's people that you know who to go to. And so therefore, I think that's why people feel like it's me or you, because I got to get to him first. I need him to be that source. Whereas a city like Atlanta, you got multiple millionaires moving in constantly. So therefore the pie doesn't stay the same size. It keeps growing. So people can get in and get their own slice without taking a piece of someone else's. And I think sometimes when you get into smaller cities and smaller mindsets, like, oh, we're not going to mess with you because you're an outsider.
Sure.
Well, that outsider could have brought some value, could have brought some resources, could have brought some money to the table to let everybody eat. Right. So I did need to say that. That's one thing that bothered me, but that I see in some of these smaller minded, it's not even just cities, but just thought processes.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said about Akon, I know man, last year, we talked about this before, but last year was the year of return to Africa, right? And so I know a lot of people that say, man, I want to go back to the motherland. I want to do this and this and that. With you being from Ghana, and going around and been in different parts of Africa, man, what would a typical American, white or black, but what would a typical American, let's just say an African American right now, expect? What should they expect? Because I think when I was growing up, and this was just me being a child watching on TV, it just looked like the entire continent was poor. You know, we saw the stereotypes of what the media said Africa was. Then all of a sudden you see Black Panther and it's like, oh, that's Wakanda. Like, is it like that? And so we've also seen, you know, people not working together well. And like you said, someone said, maybe you're not African enough. So what would an African American, what should they expect if they went to Africa, and what different parts of Africa would you recommend? Like if I was planning a trip, where would you say, man, this is where you would go, this is what you should expect, the good and the bad of it all?
I think Africa is a beautiful experience from a spiritual standpoint for any person of color, no matter where you are in the diaspora. You could be in Russia, you could be in Europe, you could be in North America, you could be in South America, but to go home to the continent, I think, is a spiritual experience, because I think it's you connecting to your roots. It's like going to a family reunion and not knowing that you may have shown up as your own family reunion, and seeing people that look like you.
When you said it, remind me of Tupac and Poetic Justice.
Yeah.
Justice, like, yo, cousin Lucky, family, right?
Right, yeah. And that's the thing about kind of, I think, that side of it. And I think it's important. I think there's been a lot of, mistruth spoken in terms of also keeping us from tapping into who we are. You know what I mean? It's funny, man. You're talking about the year of return. I was watching Harriet, the movie, on the flight, and the slave owner, Harriet Tubman, there's a scene where she was getting ready to jump off the bridge, and she said she'd choose death or freedom, either or. And he was trying to tell her it was a sin against God and all this. And I mean, she rolled the dice real quick and was like, I'm taking this leap. Yeah. And you have to respect that. And I think that in understanding just what it means, to be, to have a free perspective and an open mind, you have to really kind of shed yourself of a lot of things that you were told and deconstruct a lot.
Yeah.
And, when they talk about the miseducation of the Negro, I think that's all of that.
True.
You know what I mean?
I think that it's one thing that I think is a big root to some of the what we call black on black crime. I don't use that term too often, but some of the crime that we see is, if you don't go do your own research, you will think that African American history started with slavery, right? Yeah. You would think that we came over here on boats and it was just that, and then it was slavery, and then now here we are, where there's a lot more history. And like, I've done my 23andMe, or many of you have done Ancestry, and so one thing that I see in other races and just other people is the pride of, man, my great grandfather came here from Italy in the 1700s, and he worked this many jobs, and then he finally saved some money and bought this business, and then my great grandfather did this, and they have a timeline to where there's a sense of pride of, this is what my family has done. They started here, and they have gradually worked up to here, and now I have this, and I have this to continue to uphold because of my family namesake. Yeah. We don't have a whole lot of that. You very rarely hear people of African American descent talking like that, and therefore there's less pride in who you are, which therefore makes it easier to take another person's life or your own life, because you don't feel the sense of pride that I see other races and demographics doing. You understand what I'm saying?
I agree, and I think it's understanding a sense of self. I mean, even in terms of one of the things you mentioned earlier about taking something negative, even The Dark Secret. typically that's it's a play on something that's it's gonna be bad. Nah, this is who I am.
Yeah.
When they say, "What's the dark secret?" You asking, you looking at it.
Right.
This dark skin. I mean, let's start there. And I say the same thing. We've used a lot of terms to endear ourselves, even the N word.
Yeah.
And it's a complex thing because now that it's infiltrated pop culture and everything else, you understand what it is. But it's us knowing who we are and also beginning to change our self-talk. Like we're growing. You know what I mean? We started in this phase, now we've got to eventually graduate to another phase. So we can't continue to do that. But that's what the English language, that's the funny thing about the language.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? What is bad boys? We know everybody loves the bad guy.
Yeah.
Everybody loves the bad guy.
Yeah.
Even when you talk about movies, every culture has come from the mud. Whether if you talking about like all this stuff, when like and I have to put this perspective on it because while we're talking about what I do, I feel like a lot of people are really misinformed and they're like, well, if you guys wouldn't play this on the radio, no, we're playing what society wants.
Yeah.
Okay. And know that the music, a lot of the inspiration for the music, it's either art imitating life or, life giving that inspiration. But oftentimes gangster rap was born out of the Scarfaces, the Godfather. This stuff didn't just come out of nowhere. Yeah. These brothers are taking these Italian names and they're making that the epicenter of who they are. That's the crux because they're watching this guy, you know what I'm saying? You're watching Tony Montana come up. Now, we forget that Tony also did a lot of treacherous things to people on his side too. So you got to take the good with the bad, but we had to glorify what we know. And I feel like it's an understanding that we're constantly coming into. And by that, just like even saying how we grew into philanthropy, you see people like, Jay and, Meek Mill, the whole prison reform thing, drawing attention, like, what are you really doing with your platform? And the same thing I have to ask myself, what am I really doing with this platform? So for me, it's about appealing to those in the diaspora. You might be in the diaspora here in St. Louis. And it doesn't necessarily mean just what you look like. It starts there, but it's also about what your mindset. So you could be, white with an African-minded mindset because there's some people who are white who are going to encourage you to get understand your culture, know who you are. Yeah. And they're going to point you in that direction because they know it's important. Yeah. So at the same time, we come from a place where human beings aren't as evolved as we like to take credit for. Mm-hmm. We're very primitive because you can tell by the way we treat each other. Right. You see what I'm saying? We've treated each other in a very less than humane manner all throughout history. Yeah. And so sometimes, we're more prone to treating animals more on the level that you might expect us to treat.
You see that often.
Often. I mean, it just is what it is. People have more of an affinity for a dog than they do for another human life. And I'm not saying that dog's life isn't valuable at all, but it's unfathomable that you could treat another person like we're used to or accustomed to treating them just because. So, I mean, it's just food for thought and things that I think that we always have to be conscious of. And I try to be mindful of these things as I'm treating other people, I'm engaging other people. Like, some things just aren't that serious, and the things that we kind of put value on are the things that society at large has said this is valuable. So we look at it this way, and we all kind of gravitate in that direction. But no, we're redefining it. This money, it might be bottle caps in a minute. We might not be using dollars. We might all have to go get red Coca-Cola bottle caps. And those become the most valuable possession on earth because that's what society deems,
Right. So, man, this is some good talk. I hope y'all learning something out there because this is,
I know I go there sometimes.
Like this. No, but it's good. It's good for people to hear different perspectives and to hear people talk intelligently and about historical things and how it relates to today and everything. So, man, what's next on the horizon for you, man? I know you've moved around. You've been in D.C., Atlanta, to St. Louis, now back to Atlanta. I know that this international thing is taking off. What are some other things? I know you've dabbled in producing music, but what are some of the things that you think, where do you see the Dark Secret 3 years from now?
I look at myself as an African version of Ryan Seacrest, someone who creates content, platforms and opportunities for other people. I want to be a content creator, both audio as well as visual. So I've been working on a couple things in the TV space, and I've had some opportunities presented to me that I didn't necessarily know were going to unfold the way that they did. And so I want to continue moving, like as a host and things of that nature, presenter in my lane, but also I want to create content. I want to be able to produce, TV, film, documentaries and things like that. So I shot some footage for a documentary on, what it is and what it means to be African and African American in 2020, and kind of giving a lens through what that would look like. But that's the vein that I want to continue to grow in. So I'm just kind of educating myself, getting better at my craft every day. Just networking, building with the right people. Sometimes we hear these songs, "No New Friends," and all this stuff that we get to chanting and we get to wanting to believe. Like, listen, music is there to entertain you. There's some great things to take from it, and then there's some things that you have to reevaluate.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds cool to say "No New Friends," but if that's the case,
the most ridiculous thing I've ever
we
heard.
wouldn't have connected, and I wouldn't meet a lot of the people that and I know that I'm going to continue to meet on this journey, because that's what life is about.
I mean, no new friends. I get a part of it. It's like,
Oh yeah.
you're going to
Protect
be more
yourself.
loyal to your day ones.
Yeah.
But to sit there and act like you,
That's
that's just ridiculous. But it's a mindset. And
It's
that's
a
why I
mindset.
love that we having this conversation to continue to grow and to give education. Hopefully people can grow from this. Man, a lot of things have happened in the last month. I was just in Atlanta last month. Well, no, what was that? It was last
January,
month, in January. So I was just with Osei last month. A lot of things have happened since then. We'll get to the All-Star game and dunk contest, and maybe we can dive into Terry Crews and Gabrielle Union, Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union, and some of the stuff with their kid. But man, I do want to get your opinion, because I know you like sports, and Osei done went and watched sports at many establishments throughout over the time, man. But man, I know the loss of Kobe Bryant hit me hard. I couldn't even watch any of the tribute videos for it. Happened on that Sunday. And I couldn't even watch any of them until Thursday. Like, I was that hurt about it. Man, how did that impact you? I like hearing, like, I know where I was at, but like, why do you think that affected so many people, and how did it affect you when you heard that news?
I think it was just such a shock for people on a lot of levels, watching somebody like him, one, grow up in front of you, almost feeling like, you knew him, his family, so to speak. His spirit, his energy, who he was as a winner. He just embodied so many great things that, many people in America identify with, no matter what your background or nationality is. And he was a very global person too.
Yeah.
So, you figured his upbringing and speaking multiple languages as well.
Yeah.
There's just so many things that I think we as people connect to when we begin to see somebody and you see them on a regular basis. And he was a winner. Yeah. You watched him grow up, the highs, the lows, his trials and tribulations, his relationship with Shaq. I was really impressed with how Shaquille O'Neal spoke on him in his death, and just the relationship I discovered that they had, despite it all, and through it all. And I felt like that was really dope.
Through their kids.
Through the kids. Yep. And that says a lot. You know what I mean? That says a whole lot. I think that for me, it was like watching, I liken it to seeing the Space Shuttle Challenger when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was almost unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. Like, I can't believe it. Is this real right
now?
Right.
And it just lets you know how fragile life is and how to not take things for granted, because I'm sure they were going about their day. They were just trying to get to a game, as many people are. And also, rest in peace to those volleyball players. I know they were recently killed here. I can't think of their names, but you're going to do what you do around family, around the kids, and things of that nature. And one moment you're here, and the next you're not.
Yeah.
So you can never quite tell, and you don't know how. And I realized how much he accomplished.
Yeah.
And what was really a short life.
Yeah.
He did a lot. And, it's interesting to see how, I do believe that, you're not gone, your energy is just transferred.
Yeah.
And I think that we saw a lot of that energy just moving differently on the other side. I think 2020 has been a really interesting year.
It was a rough start.
Yeah.
January was a rough start for a lot of people in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you get a chance to watch the All-Star game, dunk contest, stuff like that?
Saw a little bit. I didn't get. You know what? Honestly, I've been working and grinding so hard. I was trying to actually get to Chicago, and I had a couple connections and some business that I was trying to, do. But I've been balancing it out. Like for myself personally, I work through the holiday, everything started to happen with this new opportunity, really beginning in the end of September, beginning of October. And it just started to take off. So sometimes you don't even realize, and you have to make some sacrifices. I mean, the weekend I was supposed to go to my college homecoming. So if you ever been to an HBCU Black College homecoming, it's huge.
Crazy.
I missed it that weekend because they called me in. We had the meeting, and that kind of began everything that's happening now. And sometimes you got to know when to sacrifice some things. I could have said, "Nah, I need to get to homecoming. I planned for this. This was a year." Sometimes, man, and I realize whether you're dealing with it, for yourself, relationships, whatever. Sometimes you're going to make some sacrifices that other people don't understand or choose not to understand. And I say that just in general. It could be your family, it could be your significant other, it could be anybody. And you have to be okay kind of like making that adjustment and saying that this is for the greater good. And so many things have happened. I had an opportunity on CNN, Headline News, just a number of things that you just can't plan.
Man, bro, I think it was T.I. that said this a while ago. Like, man, there's people out here struggling to pay their rent, pay their car note, whatever it is. And that's all right. But you going out on the club talking about spending money on popping bottles. What exactly are you celebrating? You probably need to be at home researching what your next move is. And just like you said, man, sometimes just in terms of, not even just that, but just there's so many opportunities. Like even when I played basketball, where I would go to basketball practice for 2 hours. And then afterwards I would want to go lift and go to the gym for another hour to shoot. And people just would be like, man, but you just practiced 2 hours. But no, like I know I got to work more. Like, yeah, I got to skip this party. I got to skip this road trip because there's things I got to do. So that's an important note for many of y'all out there.
Be great.
There maybe people don't understand the work that it takes to be great. People don't understand that Kobe was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, starting his workout so he can get 3 workouts in that day. People don't understand that Floyd Mayweather might go to the club, but one of the notorious tales of his is he would have his friends drive his Rolls Royces or whatever, and then they would leave the club and go to the gym, and he would jog miles to the gym behind his friends riding the Rolls Royces. Now he's already a billionaire or multi-millionaire. People are like, why won't you just sit in the car and take a ride? Well, in his mind, he always wanted to see, like he's chasing greatness, even though he's already great. And like the average person's like, that's crazy. Well, you know what? A lot of times it takes being crazy to be great.
Yes.
So to skip out on the All-Star game or skip out on this party or whatever, it's
Small
necessary.
sacrifices
It's
for the
necessary
greater good.
to be great, man. So anyway, man, how about as we close up, tell the people how they can follow you, where they can listen to you at, and how they can just get some of your content.
So if you have whatever your smartphone is, download the radio.com app and pull up V103 International out of Atlanta. We're streaming everywhere, so you can pull it up on the radio.com app. Check out the station. Certainly send any suggestions. You can follow me at Osei The Dark Secret on the gram, at African Darkness on Twitter. And I also have the Wakanda ATL podcast coming. And I wanted to just say, as it relates to Wakanda, we know it's a fictitious place. It came out of a comic book. And I think it's kind of interesting that this whole fictitious depiction of in Africa has inspired a lot of great things, because I think that single moment in history, because it came out in February 2018, in terms of Black Panther, it changed a lot for a lot of kids, seeing themselves as heroes and seeing what the potential of what they could be versus how we've been typically portrayed. And one of the reasons I'm in media is to help change the narrative or expand on it, as opposed to it just being one way. And follow me, check me out. I'm sure you'll see a lot of things coming sooner than later. And I look forward to also, maintaining and keeping a presence in the St. Louis market as well.
All right. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. We just wanted to sit here. A lot of times, guys, I might have a script somewhat of questions I know I wanted to ask, but when you with a friend that you've been knowing for years, we just wanted to sit down and start talking. I'm happy with where this podcast went. So, man, appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Anytime, man. Keep supporting my brother Marcus, man. He's an awesome brother doing some great things in this community. And I don't think that we oftentimes acknowledge those things as much as we should, but we got to. And, if you don't know it, sometimes you don't know where you can go get that support until it's no longer there for you. People tell you after the fact, oh, you could have did this, or you could have got it so-and-so, but we need to support individuals like yourself right now that are doing the good work. So continue that, man, and continue blessings.
I appreciate it, brother. So make sure y'all go follow him on all social media platforms, and spread the word about what we're doing. If you know anybody that you think might enjoy this discussion we had, this podcast, make sure you share it out and get the word out. But with that being said, man, thank you guys, and we'll holler at you later.
Yep, next time. Peace.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Osei The Dark Secret. Man, like I said, I thought we covered a lot of topics, and he's a very well-traveled person. So hopefully you learned a lot from that. And like I said, follow him. If you're in Atlanta, no matter where you're at, internet can allow you to listen to anything worldwide now. So support my man Osei. He's doing good things for in Atlanta and in the community in general. So, before we close out, like always, want to give a little bit of commentary. And so I want to touch back on something that we spoke about actually in our conversation about giving back. I ask people and I tell people that it's important to give back. And a lot of people say, well, I have nothing to give. I'm struggling to get by as it is. And so giving back, like we said, is more than giving money. It could be giving time. It could be giving knowledge. It could be giving love to someone. If there was a mentor that gave you love coming up, it's time for you to give that back. Or if there was, if you don't have money to give, it's time to volunteer in your communities. No communities are strong without people giving back and doing things that they're not being paid for, right? And so I think it's really important to remember that if you want more, you have to give more. And so I see too many people sitting back waiting to see who's going to give them what and how they're going to get a break. And, one thing I have learned in life is that, the more you give, the more you're going to receive. It's just the way life works. It's karma. I don't know. You call it God, you call it karma, whatever it is. I know that seems to be true for me. And so I really want to encourage you guys to get out of your comfort zone. I use that word a lot, use that phrase like get out of your comfort zone and go give back. Give something to the youth. You can give to seniors. You just give, right? Give something of yourself that was not required. And so people will, one thing I like to say is, I like to plant seeds for trees that I'll never see the shade, right? There's other people that's going to benefit from some of my actions today. And I think that you should think the same, right? Because that's the only way that we're going to get better as a community and get better as a city and get better as a world. So please consider giving back whatever your capacity is. If you have the money, donate to a nonprofit. Give to a child scholarship fund. If you don't have the financial means, then give your time, give your knowledge, all your experiences, whether they're good or bad. Your bad experiences, you can tell someone else how not to make the same mistakes as you did. So we all have the capacity to give. It's just a mindset. So change your mindset. Make sure that you are thinking about people outside of yourself, right? So as we close up, just want to remind you guys, subscribe on YouTube. We're on all the podcast platforms. And when you get this, if you like what you see, share it. That it doesn't hurt to hit the share button. So share it verbally, social media, whatever it takes. And we're just going to keep coming back week after week and bringing in new guests and hopefully something, things that you like to listen to and you learn from. So with that being said, we want to be great around here, but greatness is in the details. Thank you for tuning in. God bless. Peace.